Looks like we have quorum.
Yes, we do.
Thank you. Jody, welcome.
Hi, Jody.
Welcome committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Care Court Grants Committee meeting. Thank you for joining us. We are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please use the raised hand feature. Please utilize this tool to virtually indicate that you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. A friendly reminder that this is a video conference and to please be aware of your surroundings behind you. All LSTFC and committee meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar website. Zoom captioning is available. To enable, select live transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen, then select enable auto transcription. Thank you.
Thank you. Helen, should we do a roll call?
Sure. All right, Commissioner Blakemore,
Yes.
Commissioner Campbell,
Present.
Commissioner Escobedo,
Present.
Commissioner Morales, absent. Judge Klein, absent. Commissioner Pryor, here, and Chair Iskin.
Present.
So that is 5 commissioners present, 2 absent. We have quorum.
Okay. Let's get State Bar, Steve, and others.
I'm just fixing my spreadsheet. Selena, absent. Lauren,
I see that Lauren Klein and Zach Newman are in the attendee pool from LAC, who might be here on Selena's behalf.
great.
Chris, I couldn't hear that, Chris.
Oh, I can't tell if I was talking quietly or my microphone was too far away. I was saying we do have 2 representatives from LAC in the attendee pool who might be here for Selena.
Lauren Klein, I see Lauren.
Yep, I'm here. And if you could make Zach a panelist also, I'm going to have to leave before the meeting's over. Thanks.
Janet, if you don't mind. Laura Brown, I see Laura. And then Melanie, absent. I'll go ahead and do State Bar staff really quick. I am here. Dwan, I don't see Chris. I see Alexa. I see. And Brady, I don't see. Okay. Roll call is complete.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, is there any members of the public here? Does anybody wish to comment?
There is no one indicating that they'd like to speak.
Okay. All right, so I don't have the agenda in front of me, but I assume that the first couple of items, I think it's 3.1 and 3.2, are approval of the minutes of the June 7 and June 27 meetings.
That's correct.
Anybody have any comments on those minutes? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move jointly on 3.1 and 3.2, if I can do that, to approve both the minutes of the June 7th meeting and the June 27th meeting.
Catherine moves approval. Renetta seconds.
Commissioner Blakemore.
Yes.
Commissioner Campbell.
Yes.
Commissioner Escobedo.
Yes.
Commissioner Morales, absent. Judge Klein, absent. Commissioner Pryor. Yes. And Chair Iskin.
Yes.
Great. That's 5 yeses, 0 nos, 2 abstains, and motion passes.
Okay, great. So
And
are we moving on?
sorry, Helen, just for the roll call allowed, the two abstentions are 2 absences.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, so the next item, I believe, is the approval of the allocation of the care court funds. That item that may be described somewhat differently in the minutes. Do we have anything before we get to that?
No, we don't. That is the next item.
All right, so those of you who were present at the June 27th meeting know that we spent quite a bit of time at that meeting going over a proposal to allocate funding for the care court respondents amongst the various counties dealing with the shortfall that has been created by the significant cuts that the governor and the legislature have made to the budget for this item. We originally thought we had 50 million-ish. We now have something like 16.7 million, so we've had to scramble a bit and figure out ways to reallocate in a fair way. We discussed this at length, June 27th meeting. Helen, I believe do you have a PowerPoint?
I do.
So today, the one difference that we have from June 27th is that staff received some comments from some counties, and staff has proposed an additional allocation methodology that is somewhat different from the one that we approved June 27th. That staff proposal does not necessarily have the approval of commissioners, but we can discuss it. So Helen, why don't you go ahead and remind us of the June 27th proposal, and then whatever other proposal staff wants to put before us. And maybe update us also on the comments that you received between the June 27th meeting and today.
Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So this is for item 4.1, approve the 24-25 care court award amounts and the amounts for county public defender offices, which is the county allocation formula. I'll start with a summary of the 24-25 funding. The governor signed the Budget Act of 2024 on June 26th. That's a day before the committee met to discuss the county allocations. The Budget Act provides the funding amounts for the 24-25 fiscal year are at least $16.75 million to represent respondents, up to $838,000 to provide legal training and technical assistance. Of that amount, up to $275,000 might be transferred to the Office of the State Public Defender to provide legal training and technical assistance to QLSPs and public defender offices. And then $1,173,000 to cover Legal Services Trust Fund Commission and State Bar administrative costs. The Budget Act also states the grantees and funding recipients will be able to spend down through January 1st, 2026.
And the $275,000 for the Office of the State Public Defender would be transferred on order of the State Department of Finance. So that's not like a state bar, like discretionary thing.
Next, I'll go into the allocating funding by county, which is what the committee discussed on June 27th. As a friendly reminder, the committee noted in the request for proposals that it planned to revisit county allocations if care court funding was much lower in the Budget Act than in the governor's January proposal. And given the significant decrease, which was about 65%, the committee met on June 27th and discussed two adjustments to the county allocation formula. The first adjustment is to prorate each county's start date for care court. Counties must start care court on July 1st or by December 1st. That July 1st start date is for cohort 1, who has already launched care court. Counties planning to launch on or after October 1st would receive 9 months of funding, and that would give counties 2 months of startup costs, which is consistent with the 23-24 funding. Staff also consulted with the Judicial Council on prorating and tying the start dates on the grant and funding agreements to the care court start dates required by the statute. Prorating would also only be for the first year for cohort 2. The 9 counties that launched care court on July 1st would receive 12 months of funding, so they wouldn't be prorated. And then those prorated funds for the 9-month category counties would be respread amongst these counties, these 12-month counties. The second adjustment the committee discussed was calibrating the minimum funding to the amount in the Budget Act. The RFP proposed a single funding floor of $60,000, regardless of a county's population. It also used the amount in the governor's January 2024 proposal. This adjustment proposes a 3-tier approach to the funding floor. And under this 3-tier approach, allocations for counties under the floor would better reflect their population sizes and needs. For example, the smallest county under the floor would not get the same amount as the largest one. And then the highest funding floor would still be 60,000 after prorating for start date, and that matches the floor in the RFP. In the slides ahead, table 1 and 2 will provide proposed allocations for a 3-tier approach that reflects the lower amount in the Budget Act after prorating for start date. Staff proposes table 1 and 2 for the committee's consideration. As Chair Iskin mentioned, table 1 reflects a proposal from both staff and 2 members of the committee. Following a public comment at the June 27th meeting, staff reached out to public defender offices for 8 counties that would fall under the funding floor, and staff met with 4 of them. Those offices expressed a need in small counties for more funding to build the capacity to represent respondents. So table 2 reflects an alternate option from staff only in response to the feedback, and it provides an increased buffer to cover such costs for the committee to consider. Table 2 would increase the minimum funding for counties with general populations at or below 100,000 people by 10,000, and that's before prorating for start date. I do want to note that it does this by redirecting funds from counties with populations over 200,000. This could increase the risk of hardship for those counties since they'll see the most cases in 24-25, and it results in a considerably higher rate of funding per petition in very small counties than in larger ones.
Before you go to the next slide, can you are you somewhere going to remind everybody of the assumptions of the floors for table 1 and the floors for table 2, just so we can see what the differences are?
Yes, that's in the next slides.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and go into proposed allocations to represent
But
respondents.
before you get to the allocations, though, do we see what the assumptions are? Like, okay, so for table 1, I'm just going to say this: if you have this listed somewhere, just stop me. But the first allocation proposal has a 3-tiered floor, which is for the smallest counties, that is populations. Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's what I was asking. Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just the little cover slide. So as Eric was saying, the next slides will show the county allocations for option 1, which is what the committee discussed at its meeting on June 27th. The allocations show the funding floors after prorating by start date, and those are the amounts that are on the lower portion of the slide. So for counties with a population of 0 to 30,000, after prorating, those counties would receive 22,500 in minimum funding. Counties with a population of 30,001 to 100,000 would receive 37,500 in minimum funding, and counties with a population of 101,000 to 200,000 would receive $60,000 in minimum funding. These are the tables. I'll stay on each of the slides for a few seconds. The second column is each county's general population. The state is estimating 3,350 care court petitions across all 58 counties for 24-25. Column 3 shows the county's estimated number of petitions based on its general population. This is not the same as county case estimates. They're just estimates based on, it's a general population allocation. The fourth column shows each county's proposed allocation to represent respondents, which, so those are the amounts that, those are the adjusted amounts with the 3-tier funding floor. And then the last column is the estimated amount per petition. For the last column, on a statewide basis of 16.75 million to represent respondents in 3,350 petitions, that would result in $5,000 per petition.
Just stay on the slide for a minute, just to illustrate how this option really works. The first tier was counties with a population of 0 to 30,000. So just from this page, examples of that. Alpine is really small. I'm going to skip that. It's a real outlier. But like Colusa, for example, has a population of 21,600. And they're only getting, they would get, I shouldn't say only, they would be getting 22,500 under this prorated approach. But note that they only are estimated to have 2 cases. Now, of course, we don't know if this is accurate. Nobody knows. They might have more, they might have less. Everybody might have more, might have less. But this is the best number that we have. So for those two cases, that county would get $11,250 per case. Whereas if you look at the next line, Contra Costa County, which would be getting a lot more under this approach, 373,000, that's just allocating the money by general population. But they're estimated to have 99 cases, and which would result in $3,767 or $68 roughly per case, which they're getting a lot more money in gross terms, but per case, they're actually getting less than Calusa, again, if these case numbers are accurate. An example of a tier 2 county, I'm not sure if we have one on this page.
Yeah. Amador, I'll go on to the next slide. Lake is one.
Lake, right. So Lake has a population of 66,000. They would be in the second tier of 30,001 to 100,000. They would get 37,500 prorated under this proposal. They're estimated to have 6 cases. They would get $6,250 per case. So I just wanted to call out those examples so you can see, the smaller counties might at first glance appear that they're not getting much money. They're really not. But also, you have to keep in mind that the forecast number of cases for those counties is very low. So the actual per case amount, again, assuming these case forecasts are accurate, ends up being significantly higher for those lower population counties than it is for some of the larger counties, even though the larger counties are getting a lot more money in total under this proposal.
And then just for mathematical reference, the amount per petition is column 4 divided by column 3.
I have a question.
Yeah.
First of all, I hope you got the message. I was going to be late. I think I sent it to you, Christopher. But anyway, I guess the question I have is that with a county with only a small rural county, 2 cases, is there a learning curve that requires more time per case because they've just got to learn how to try them, how to litigate them, versus ones that have a lot of cases where it's just another case down the hall and they've done all the sort of startup work? And second, are the legal fees for lawyers, whatever, less in some of these rural counties? So I don't know if it's simply a matter of, just looking at how many cases they have and doing a division for how much work it would be required if you haven't done one and there's no one down the hall you can talk to or whatever.
Well, I'm going to answer that and then I'll let others chime in as well. My answer would be, Cliff, we are giving counties some opportunity for a learning curve because we're starting, for example, the counties that start on December 1st, we're funding them starting on October 1st. So they have at least some time to ramp up. Secondly, everybody's going to have a learning curve, right? Not just Alpine, but LA's going to have a learning curve too. So I'm not sure that is significantly different. I guess you have more people in LA, obviously, in the public defender's office than you do in Calusa. Thirdly, we are actually funding a significant amount of dollars is going to the state office of the public defender for training for counties. So the answer to your question is yes. There probably is more of a learning curve or there could be for the smaller counties, but I'm not sure. And in terms of the legal fees, we actually did consider that question at the get-go, at the threshold of figuring out how we were going to allocate the funds. We considered whether to build in a lodestar for legal fee differentials between the counties. We played with that last year, actually. I'm not sure if we did it or not. We decided not to do that this year because it was going to be just kind of complicated to try and figure that out. But that, by the way, would allocate more money to the bigger counties.
Yeah,
right? Because the legal fees are higher in LA.
that was my point, right?
All right, I'm going to shut up and let anybody else respond to Cliff's question. If anybody has any thoughts about that.
I saw Catherine's hand raised.
Yeah, Catherine, go ahead.
I mean, you made the point, essentially, there's a significant training that's been now built into the state budget. It's not done by RFP for the statewide public defender's office. And that training's provided without cost to the attorneys that are doing this representation. As I recall from last year, it also included travel to the training for those that were in person. And then there's a fair amount of training done by Zoom. So it's a pretty robust training module to help ensure the competence of representation.
And
Well,
I'll
I think we all know from where your new trial lawyers, those first few took a lot more time. Anyway, no matter how much training you had. All right.
And I'll add during staff's outreach to the public defender offices in the tier 1, 2, and 3 that those public defender offices did communicate that they would use the funds for startup, which we did build in, but there would be some amount of infrastructure that would need to be built because CareCourt is new, as it's new for the entire state, but particularly for the rural counties, that the funding would be used for that as well.
Any other thoughts about either Cliff's question or any other thoughts?
So I will move on then. This is table 2. It presents the alternate option that increases tier 1 and tier 2's funding floors by 10,000. Again, this is a staff only proposal, but the allocations will again show the funding floors after prorating by start date, and those are the amounts in the lower portion of the slide. I'll stay on each of these slides for a few seconds. You might notice that the two options are very similar to each other. The increases in the funding floor redirects funds from counties with populations over 200,000, and then also results in a considerably higher rate of funding for per petition in very small counties than in larger ones in the last column. So you'll see the differences in columns 4 and 5 here.
Do you have a side-by-side? You don't have one on this PowerPoint, right? To show.
Not on the PowerPoint, but I have it. I can pull it up. I would just have to
sort of illustrate. And again, like you mentioned, Eric, Alpine is sort of the outlier, but they jumped up, I think, from $22,500 per petition, or per their general population base share petitions, to 30,000. And then Calusa, which was the one that you thought was maybe a little bit of a better example, jumped, I think, from like a little over $11,000 per petition to 15,000. So it's a significant increase at the petition rate between tables 1 and 2. For counties that are that would be in like under the first 2 funding floors.
And conversely, yeah, thanks, Chris. And conversely, a more mid-sized county like Marin, can you jump back to the previous page, for example? Like Marin, which is 255,000, under this proposal, it would get a total of, you can see the 81,588 essentially, with about $3,709 per petition. Then if you could jump back to the previous proposal, Marin, it's hard to keep these numbers in mind, but they would get a little bit more under this proposal and a little bit more per petition. So we're moving from option 1 to option 2, as I guess Helen essentially pointed out already. It moves money from the larger counties, including the more mid-sized counties, to the smallest counties.
Yeah, so Marin drops from $3,760 per petition to $3,708. So that's a good, yeah. And it kind of scales with the counties. Like, obviously the larger counties like LA their drop will be raw dollar value wise more because their general population based like share of chipping in more money for the tier 1 and 2 funding floor counties is going to be greater.
Can you just show us what the impact is on San Francisco? Because that's one of the counties where the legal aid programs are providing the work. And
It might be good to pull up the side by side if you could, just so we can see this more
That,
clearly.
that'd be helpful. Thank you.
I can give that number while Helen's pulling it up. So San Francisco under table 1, which is the lower funding floors for tiers 1 and 2, gets $6,188 per petition. And then under table 2 would get less. It gets $6,133. So
They lose what, almost $4,000, right?
I'm sorry, what was that, Catherine?
I thought that when you look at the difference, it's almost 4,000, right?
Oh, let me see.
Difference between the two funding floors, I think, is about 4,000, 39 something. But almost like rounded to 4,000 for San Francisco.
Helen, are you pulling up the side by side?
I am just.
Thank you, Helen. Yeah, and while Helen's doing that, I'll just sort of say there's staff typically tries to take a position or make a recommendation, but truly the pros and cons of table 1 versus table 2 are most appropriately left to the committee's discretion because it is a zero-sum game. So to pull more funds from larger counties to do more in the way of propping up an even higher funding floor for the little counties might go a long way for the little counties, but it is going to take money away from the counties that are, objectively speaking, going to see the most cases. And then, it's I don't want to call it a wash, but it's an important strategic public policy decision with pros and cons, and the committee's in the best position to make that judgment call.
Let me know if you can see my screen and if it's big enough.
Yes.
Big enough, you did great.
Great. So this is a side-by-side comparison. We can use San Francisco as the example. So I'll go ahead and scroll down and highlight that. So under the funding floors of 30,000, 50,000, 80,000, their county allocation is 445,579. And then under the funding floors of 40,000, 60,000, 80,000, the allocation is 441,599. And then the difference is about 4,000. That might make it a little easier to read.
It's good to read. I can see it. Thank you.
And can we go back up to Colusa, the county that we talked about?
Sure.
Talking about.
It says right here.
Yeah,
So
so that's an example of the lowest tier that would be really that tier is the biggest beneficiary of moving from option 1 to option 2, and you can see that under option 1 they get 11,250 per petition. Under option 2, 15,000 per petition. They're forecast to have 2 cases.
I'll find a.
Do you want to show Los Angeles, which probably would be giving up, just as like to show like the other end of the spectrum, like they're probably giving up the most by if the committee were to adopt table 2.
Yeah, so under option 2, Los Angeles County would be giving up 46,000, about 46,500, and then about $54 per case.
Yeah, because it kind of scales, right, with the size, with their general population, how much they're giving up under table 2 versus table 1. So they're two, I think, very reasonable options, to be honest. Or they both have their pros and cons, right? They're both, the table 1 leaves, it gives a very meaningful funding floor for the smallest counties in the state and leaves the sort of per petition funding rate closer. Like it's still quite a spread. The funding floors are really bringing up the smaller counties per petition, like how much money they're getting by quite a bit. Table 2 would be responsive to limited feedback that the state bar received. And just to be honest, we were only able to speak with 4 offices because it was the 4th of July holiday, but also the Judicial Council. So, but obvious drawback of that is that the money can only come from one place. It has to come from urban California or the more like urban, large rural counties, like maybe Riverside, and they're going to see the most cases, like for sure. So, so it's pros and cons. Catherine.
I guess I have some concern that the smallest counties end up with these very significant amounts of money, I think as a cushion. But if you take some of the smaller counties, like even looking at Alpine, they would have to quadruple their number of expected cases to be able to spend the money on the sort of assumption of 5,000 per case, more than quadruple their cases, right? So we're really providing a condition, a set of circumstances for the very smallest counties, which are expected to have 1 case, which is the only number we have for anybody. We're kind of using consistent data, and to the disadvantage of counties. And I think some of the biggest impact ends up being on those counties that are, just above the funding floor, where I think the risk to them is that they will in fact get more cases, but they will have less money per case under the second funding floor. So, for that reason, I think I think the one that does a better job of equalizing it among the counties, like, California is interesting. We have very small counties with populations of 1,500. And then we have counties like Los Angeles, but trying our best to equalize it to ensure that people have a more equal amount of money that's being spent per case, just makes sense to me.
It's a really good point, Commissioner Blakemore. And actually, and Helen, I'm glad you highlighted Butte, because Butte's a really good example.
Yeah,
Right
that-
above,
to
it's
help
not getting a funding
visualize.
floor. Yeah. And this, I think, to kind of advance Commissioner Blakemore's point, like, I'm unsure if this is true, but there, some, maybe not all of the larger counties, like maybe LA, maybe San Diego, maybe Orange, maybe San Francisco, maybe none of them, but some of them might say, well, we can afford like a $50 decrease. No one has said that, by the way. But I think a smaller county like Butte, who's just above the funding floors, would be less likely to say that. They're just barely above the floors. They're not going to be like, oh yeah, our huge infrastructure can absorb this. So that's a good example to look at.
Yeah, I would agree with both of those comments. I favor the first proposal, option 1. I mean, the rationale for option 2 would be an unanticipated significant increase in the caseload for the smallest counties, but I don't really see any basis for planning for that necessarily, because if there's an unanticipated increase in caseload, I'm not sure why it would add significantly it would have a significantly greater impact on the smaller counties than on the more mid-sized or larger counties. They might all have increases in caseload. So I think we just have to plan with the number that we have. And given the number that we have, as imperfect as it is, I think we're more than generously funding the smallest counties with option 1. And by the same token, providing at least a somewhat arguably adequate amount of funding for the more mid-sized and larger counties. So I would favor that one personally. Option 1.
Eric, I see Vanetta has her hand raised.
Yeah, Vanetta, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I'm inclined to agree with option 1. What comes to mind is this is the second year of this pilot program. The funds were very generous the first year, less than significantly the second year, but that being said, it's still new. And there's an opportunity for each county to continue to develop their recruitment efforts to get more, cases or more petitions as needed, get more training as needed. And, perhaps if it's funded in the third year, that might be opportunities to make some additional adjustments. So I think the project is too new to make significant changes, so I'm in favor of table one.
Efren, did you have your hand up as well?
I did, Eric, but Vanetta very eloquently covered the point I was going to make. So I too am supportive of option one, and for the reasons Vanetta mentioned about the earliness of it, and potential before we raise per case rates, having some actual real data versus more interview data to substantiate costs.
Yeah, I agree. And hopefully we will get some more data. We should pretty soon get the data for the first full year of the program. And we'll have we'll set committee meetings before the end of the second year so that we can study the data and maybe come up with a better way to allocate these monies next year. But for now, yeah, I agree. Hey, are there any other comments or questions?
I have a question. When I worked in the DA's office and there were grants, they used to take part of it for, the electricity, for the lights, and, that kind of thing, using it to increase funding across the board, which I thought was, well, you know what I thought, what many of us thought. Are there any controls in here when we're trying to figure out what it is per case? Are they going to be looking at overhead costs, which makes it more difficult to determine is the money really spent on the clients who need help? Does anyone know the answer to that?
We will. Oh, I'm so sorry, Helen. Go for it.
The counties do have to report quarterly expenditures, but the cases, the funds are limited to activities that relate to representing respondents. But there are such line items or like office space and things like that, like non-personnel administrative costs.
So they
So
can.
we will be able to report back to you.
So they can deduct for overhead, which of course,
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they have 10 cases or one case.
They can.
Same amount.
And we would be able to report back to the committee on at the county level if that were helpful, what like the overhead rate was in any particular quarter or for the year.
Thank you.
So it's Catherine, if there isn't other discussion, I would make a motion to recommend approval. I guess, are we approving this, Eric?
Yes.
Delegate us to approve option one as the funding formula.
Do we have a resolution?
We do have a resolution, but before that, I do have a slide with the 24-25 award recommendations for
I thought we already approved. Didn't we already approve that?
We had approved the recommendations of the applicants to the full commission on their June 21st meeting. And then that was prior to when the Budget Act passed. So now that the Budget Act has passed, the committee, the resolution includes the actual amounts.
All right, sure.
So this is the last slide, the 24-25 awards. Staff recommends that the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, Legal Aid Society of San Bernardino, and Legal Aid Society of San Mateo County receive their full requests. That's in line with the scoring team's original recommendation, and that the committee adjusts the Justice and Diversity Center of the Bar Association of San Francisco and legal assistance to the elderly to amounts proportional to equal the amount available to represent respondents in San Francisco County. So table 3 shows the final amounts for staff recommendation. Under option 1, for JDC and LAE, which are the 2 San Francisco applicants, their proportionately adjusted amounts are in the last column.
Okay. So this assumes that we adopt the option 1 allocation. If we were to adopt option 2, it would be a lower amount for
correct. For option 2, JDC's amount would be 204,918, and then LAE's would be 236,682. It'd be slightly lower.
Okay.
So JDC and LAE will be getting the full amount for San Francisco. Just to say it aloud, in the San Francisco Public Defender's Office wouldn't be getting it, but JDC and LAE would be taking all the cases next year. Steph did check in with both of them to hear if they had concerns about the numbers. we actually started checking with them back in like early June. So we've had several conversations with them. They said they can accept these amounts. They agreed with a proportional split between them, proportional to their asks. And it just for the record, at least one of the two grantees said, it was JDC, that this may only be economically feasible for them because they do get to carry forward some funds from 23-24, but that like sort of just going forward, if they weren't able to do that, they're unsure that they'd be able to do it for this amount of money, but they didn't take issue with the allocation formula itself. It was more just the amount of money that was provided at a statewide level.
Any questions about this page? If not, let's go to the resolution.
Here is the resolution. Should the committee concur, passage of the following resolution is recommended. Resolved that the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission, Care Court Grants Committee, acting on behalf of the LSTFC under its delegated authority, approves the 24-25 Care Court county allocations in Table 1 and the 24-25 Care Court award amounts in Table 3.
And then you will need to edit how
In
on the
real-
slide to remove. Yeah,
Got it, in
unfortunately.
real
Sorry.
time. No worries. I was getting prepared to do that. Okay.
Catherine, is that your motion?
That's my motion. Thank you.
I'll second.
Have a lot of windows up. Okay. Commissioner Blakemore,
Yes.
Commissioner Campbell,
Yes.
Commissioner Escobedo,
Yes.
Commissioner Morales, abstained due to absence, Judge Klein,
Yes.
Commissioner Pryor,
Yes.
and Chair Iskin.
Yes.
That is 6 yeses, 0 noes, and 1 abstention due to absence. The motion carries.
Great. Do we have anything else on the agenda?
That is the last item.
So when is our next meeting?
The next one that's scheduled, I believe it's in the fall.
It might have been, Helen, we might have scheduled them out only through the end of August.
Oh, okay.
So we might need to schedule, well, in consultation with the chair, we would need to schedule 1 or more fall meetings.
So I have a hold for August 21st. Does anyone else have that?
I believe we canceled the July and August meetings.
Well,
Yeah, I think I received those cancellations.
okay.
So I mean, yeah, we don't necessarily need to.
I
meet
will
it,
get rid of this off my calendar then.
But I do think we need to meet at least once in the fall for purposes of looking at data and thinking about how we'll be thinking about allocating funding for next year based on actual experience with this program. So will we have significantly more data in like
We
November,
will.
something like that?
We will, yeah. We'll receive the 3rd quarter data by end of day today. And then the cohort 1 they submit annual reporting that is due in August. So I think the fall, we do have to also produce a report for the Judicial Council for the data that we collected throughout the year. So I think that would, a meeting sometime in like mid to late August would probably.
Not August, well, August?
I'm
No.
sorry, in October.
Yeah.
I would say if you wait until October, then cohort 1, except for LA County, will have completed a full year because they started on October 1 of 2023. So by October 15th, which will be the county's deadline to send us like their case numbers for July through September, we could give you a full year's worth of what for those 7 counties it looked like.
That's great. That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be good. I mean, unfortunately, the next cohort, for the most part, won't even have started by then, right? They're not even starting until December 1, but I guess we should at least look at the full year data for cohort 1. So let's set maybe like October-ish a meeting.
I'll send a doodle out.
I'll do the last 2 weeks of October. So like we won't have analyzed all the data, but we could at least quickly pull their like case closed numbers, case open numbers and stuff.
Is there a commission
spending
meeting in November? I mean, I'm wondering just for efficiency, whether it would make sense to schedule this like on the morning of a commission meeting. So I don't know whether people like that idea or not, but just to kind of consolidate all these meetings on one day. Or is that too much?
I don't think State Bar staff actually has a preference, but we've heard from some commissioners that like if the commission meets in the afternoon, it's hard for them to also do a committee meeting in the morning. So we try to avoid it, but only I think State Bar staff, we work a full day either way, so we're happy to do it. But we've heard from commissioners that it's not their preference.
All right, well, not hearing any strong support one way or the other. Let's just shoot for a meeting in October.
I will look at some dates. I'll coordinate with you, Eric, and then send out a doodle.
Okay, great. Well, thanks to staff for doing all the work that you've done on this, Helen and Chris, and Catherine also for spending time with me on this. It's been hopefully worthwhile. I'm happy with the result. I don't know if anybody else is. Anyway, all right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, and thank you from staff too to the whole committee and especially to Chair Skin and Commissioner Blakemore for an enormous amount of time and thought partnership that they contributed to staff's proposal of Table 1 over basically all of June. I think maybe for Commissioner Blakemore, even going into like late May when the governor originally released his revised budget proposal. Like it's been a long, like a relatively long amount of time for those 2 committee members to be thought partners to State Bar staff. So thank you for being so generous with your time.
It was
Here,
great. Prepare for the county population quiz at the October meeting. Eric and I have them memorized now.
All right, everybody.
If you can identify the location of the county, you'll get bonus points.
All right, thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you, everybody. Have a great morning.
Take care.
Bye.